So you're going to be going on a Royal Caribbean cruise and you want to do some stand-up surfing on the Flowrider. But to be able to do that, you first need to pass the stand-up riding test. Today, I'm going to show you all of the steps involved in taking the test, the skills needed to pass it, and the most common mistakes that you don't want to do. We even have a short little section on how to carve in here. So if you want to pass this test and have the greatest cruise of your life, then keep watching. Okay, let's talk about flow riding on Royal Caribbean ships. First thing I want to get out of the way is that I've never been flow riding on a cruise. When I go on vacation, I always go to land-based flow riders at various resorts. So when I was asked to do this video on how to pass the stand-up flow rider test, what I did was I went to the Facebook group page of the Royal Caribbean Flowrider Society, and I asked the members to give me all of the details on the test and what they felt should go into this video. And I got a lot of great responses. Now, the requirements do vary slightly ship to ship, but in general, they're pretty close to each other. I'd like to add in that this video was made in July of 2024. Rules and requirements on Royal Caribbean ships are constantly evolving. So if you've been on a ship lately and something has changed, then please let us know by leaving it in the comments. Also, if you have any tips that you think will help new riders, then please leave those in the comments also. To start the process, you're going to go to the activity desk and you're going to let them know that you want to do stand-up flow riding. They're going to make you watch 2 videos and sign a waiver. Then they're going to give you a white band. Sometimes the colors are going to vary, and they're going to initial the band. The band allows you to use the flow rider for bodyboarding, and the initials on it allow you to take the test so that you can do stand-up riding. Now, you can only take the stand-up test during certain flow rider sessions. There are 4 types of flow sessions. There's a bodyboard only session, which we don't care about. There's a mixed wave session where both bodyboarders and stand-up riders participate. Then there are 2 stand-up only sessions, which are the self-assist session and the advanced session. Now, you can only take the stand-up test during the mixed and the self-assist sessions. You can't take it during the advanced session because testing people slows down the session and the advanced riders don't want that. But here's the kicker. You only get 2 attempts to try to pass it. If you don't pass it, you can't get back in line and keep riding. You can try the test again an hour later when the flow guards change shifts and there are new guards on the wave, or you can come back when a new session starts. The test basically consists of showing the guards that you can load yourself onto the wave and that you have some basic control when you ride. If you pass this test, then they'll give you a blue band and you're good to participate in any stand-up session. So today we're going to show you the basic skills that are needed to pass the stand-up test. Now, to be honest, if you've never ridden a flow rider before, then it's going to be hard to pass this test, but apparently some absolute beginners do pass it. You really need to have at least a few runs to get the feel of what it's like to stand up on the wave. So go to a few of the mixed wave self-loading sessions and see if you can get enough attempts at the blue band test to figure it out. But if you really have your heart set on doing a lot of flow riding during the cruise, then I would recommend taking a $70 lesson where the flow guards will hold onto you and load you onto the wave until you get your balance, and they'll also use a rope to assist you. They only do that during paid lessons and it really helps a lot. That's how I learned. Also, if you take the lesson and you do good enough, then the guards will probably give you the blue band right there. Some people refer to this as buying the band, but hey, whatever works. We just want to ride stand-up. If you're going to do this, then it's a good idea to book a lesson for the first day of the cruise, but book it way in advance of getting on the ship, as those early times fill up very quickly. Also, here's another idea. You can see if there's a land-based flow rider within a few hours of you that you could go to for the day and learn how to do stand-up. There is a list of all the Flowrider locations in the world at flowrider.com. I'll put a link down below in the comments for you. Now, once you get to the wave, what's going to happen is the guard will probably have you take a run with a bodyboard just to get used to the feel of the water pressure, because it's an unexpectedly large amount of water pressure coming at you. Then they'll hand you a flow board and they may go over some of the basics with you. Now, I just want to get this out there. I go to a lot of different flow riders, and at them, some of the guards are very experienced and give you great information. And then some of the guards are very inexperienced and give you some not so great information. What I'm going to tell you right now is the easiest way to do these things, and why doing them is going to help you with this blue band test and also with your future riding. But if the best rider on the ship is telling you a different way to do things, and you think you might be more comfortable doing them that way, then by all means give that a try and do whatever works best for you. All we care about is getting that blue band. So let's get into the basics, and we'll start with foot placement first. Usually on the ships, they're using Flowrider brand Outlaw boards, which do have a front and a back to them. If you look at the bottom, you're going to see a label. They all have that label, and that is the back of the board or the tail of the board. Most people who are right-handed ride with their right foot in back on the tail of the board, and lefties usually put their left foot on the tail. If for some reason it feels better to you to do it the other way, then go ahead and do that. Now, we're going to be using what's called a skateboard stance, which is the best stance that you can use in flowboarding. You're first going to place your back foot on the tail of the board about an inch from the back edge. You actually want the curve of your toes to be on the curve of the board, and your heel is going to be over the opposite edge. You steer with your back foot in flowboarding, so you need to be all the way on the back of it with your toe and your heel on those steering edges. Now, for your front foot placement, you want to get your feet about shoulder width apart so that you feel comfortable. Usually that's just forward of the board midpoint. Now, with your front foot, and this is important, you want to line up your heel with the edge of the board, and if there's a little bit of a gap between your toe and the toe edge, then that's okay. You don't want to be centered. Line up the edge with your heel. And last, don't have your feet going straight across the board where you're pigeon-toed and uncomfortable. Your toes can flare out a little bit as if you were just standing up normally where you're nice and comfortable. I do have a whole video on flowboard stances if you need more explanation. Now, you want to stand up nice and upright with your knees slightly bent. You don't want your knees totally straightened out, and you also don't want to be in one of these squatting positions. You want to put about 70% of your weight on your back foot and about 30% of your weight on your front foot. If you're a skateboarder, it's almost like doing a wheelie the whole time. An easy way to get your weight balance correct is to shift your upper body back so that your head is just in front of your back knee. Now, you want 70% of your weight in back for 3 reasons. First off, you steer by pushing out your back foot, so you want to have the weight there to control those edges better. Second, the water pressure wants to push the board back out from under you. It's kind of like pulling the carpet out from under you. So you need to compensate for that. And then third, digging the back end of the board into the water is just going to keep your board straighter so you don't start spinning sideways. Now, the first big requirement that you need to show the flow guards is that you can load or push yourself into the Flowrider without any help from anyone else. There are 2 ways to push yourself into the Flowrider. One is where you're pushing yourself in off the mat, and the other is where you're pushing yourself off the sidewall. Both methods have their advantages and disadvantages. We'll show you both of these, and you can decide whichever one works easier for you. Now, it's really important where we stick our board down to push into the wave. There is a sweet spot on the wave where the water current that is pushing you up the wave is equal to the gravity that's pulling you down the wave. So if you start there, you'll stay in that one spot and you won't have to worry about moving up and down the wave. All you're going to have to worry about is moving side to side on the wave. So you're going to place your board on the riding surface in the flats just in front of where the wave starts to curve upward.
Usually you can find this spot because that's where the sidewalls tend to change angle, although there are some exceptions to that. Get your board as close to the water current as possible so you don't have to do any extra pushing in.
One of the biggest mistakes that I see beginners make is they try to push into the current very close to the nozzle, and when the current hits the board, it starts pushing them up the wave, and now they have to deal with trying to stop themselves from going up and down the wave in a never-ending pendulum. If this happens to you, then all you need to do is, as you're coming down the wave, put more weight on the tail, and that'll act like a brake to slow you down and stop that motion. We call this a tail brake. You want to slow yourself down and settle into that sweet spot at the bottom of the transition where you're not going to move up and down the wave.
Now, the next thing to explain about a Flowrider is that the water current thins out at the edges of it. We call this the shallow water. Now, you can't ride your board very well in the shallow water because your board bottoms out and touches the riding surface. So when you push in, you need to push through the shallow water and get past it until you get into the deep water. How do we know when we're in the deeper water? And this is really important. When you start to feel your board start to float, then you're in the deep water, and that's when you can start to pick your hands up and stand up. Now, to be on the safe side, you want to push yourself in at least a foot or a foot and a half before you start to feel yourself float well, and then you can stand up. It's going to be different on every ship. The most common mistake that I see everybody make is not pushing themselves far enough into the water, and then they try getting up. When you stand up in the shallow water, usually what happens is your tail bottoms out, and then the current grabs the nose of the board and starts turning the board to the middle of the wave. If your board swings out, then you're not going to be able to get it realigned. So step off the board, pick it up, get the board set, and try it again. It's better to step off the board in a controlled manner and start again than wipe out. The guards probably won't even count it as an attempt. So here's the pushing motion. I usually start off with 2 hands on the mat to get the pushing motion going, and then get myself into the shallow water. Now, with all your weight on the board, it's not going to move and slide into the water very easily. What you need to do is a little bouncing motion to lighten up the board so that it slides easier. We call this unweighing the board, and when we unweigh it, it'll slide little by little. When you unweigh on the board, your toes are always touching the board, but they let up on some of the pressure to get that sliding going. Keep your hands close to your board, which will keep your body over the board. Don't sprawl out. So once again, I start bouncing on my board and push with 2 hands into the shallow water. Once I have a little bit of that shallow water underneath me, then I usually don't have to keep bouncing, and then I start pushing in 1 hand at a time. Once I start to feel the board start to float, then I start to stand up. Now, the other method that a lot of people prefer to load themselves is by pushing off the sidewall. This is probably the easier method. To do this, go to the same spot that you would when you're pushing yourself off the mat and put your board down next to the water current. Now all you're going to do is start bouncing and unweighing your board and then push it into the current. As your board is getting into the current, you're going to give 1 big final push, hard enough so that you push off the wall and your body comes straight up over the board into a riding position. On lots of ships, the wall is so close that it's just 1 bounce and push into the current. In general, the walls on cruise ships are much closer than land-based waves. So what are the advantages and disadvantages to each method? The advantage to the pushing off the wall method is that you're already standing up, but the disadvantage is that when you do the final push off the wall where you let go of it, it could be a little jolting and off balancing to beginners, as you need to reestablish your balance very quickly. Obviously, the closer the wall is to the current, then the less jolting it will be. With the pushing off the mat method, the advantage is that you can push yourself out and stand up slowly and methodically, but the disadvantage is that going from a squatting position up to standing can be a very challenging task for beginners. If the walls on your particular ship are close, then it's probably easier to just push off the wall. I would suggest using that method. Body position. For your body position, you want to be standing up straight with your knees slightly bent. If you try squatting down a lot, it's really awkward and it makes it harder to control the board. You want to keep your arms at a 45-degree angle right here. That's going to allow you to move them in all directions for balance corrections that you'll need at first. What you don't want to do is you don't want to bring your hands up all the way high like this. Lots of lifeguards are going to tell you to do that, but don't do it. It just raises your center of gravity and it makes it harder to move around because you need to swing your arms around when you turn. Now let's talk about your head. First of all, when you're doing basic carving, your head really doesn't move. We'll talk about that more in a minute. Now, a lot of lifeguards are going to tell you to look straight ahead towards the nozzle at the bottom of the Flowrider. Don't do that. You want your head to look anywhere from directly straight out to the side of the Flowrider up to another 45 degrees forward.
Now this is really important. The reason you don't want to face straight forward towards the front of the Flowrider is because when you move your head to that position, your shoulders start to follow it, which opens up your whole body and then gets your hips and your board drifting sideways. Once your board goes sideways, most likely you're going to catch an edge and fall on your face. This is the most common scenario that beginning riders fall from. Towards the end of the video, I'm going to show you the simplest way to correct yourself if you do start drifting sideways, but what we really want to do is prevent this drifting from happening in the first place. So I got a great piece of advice from Dale Kelly. What he was saying is that since your body follows where your head goes, he just keeps his head looking straight to the side of the Flowrider from where he pushed off of, which will keep his shoulders square and minimize that drifting where your body starts to open up. I think that's a great tip, and I would definitely keep my head looking straight to the side for this test and also when you start riding. Once you get more comfortable, then you can start turning your head to more of a 45-degree angle. All right, so that's the end of part one. In part two, we're going to show you how to carve on a Flowrider. It's actually really easy. Then we're going to show you the two biggest mistakes that people make when taking this test and how to make sure those never happen to you. So let's go check out part two.